Morning, everyone. I'm Daniel. This is Sunham. We're from Trinity McQueen, an independent research consultancy, and we're here to talk to you about Generation Game. We've reached this point where gaming within households is kind of near universal. It's kind of very unsurprising that most children play video games regularly, and in our survey, 88% of kids said they did. However, what was also surprising, how much the parents are playing video games as well, and that kind of interaction between parents and children within the household is really kind of changing children's expectations around video games, what they want from video games, and how quickly their kind of needs and tastes develop over time. So, an interesting place to start from. I think this research came from something quite personal. I've got two young girls, and they very much gravitate towards screens like moths to a flame. Being a responsible parent, I'm always trying to kind of manage their expectations and manage their screen time. But as I do that, I kind of look around my living room, and I'm very conscious of the kind of bounty of screens, devices, gadgets, which they can kind of play and interact with. And I'm very much conscious that their behaviour is learned behaviour, and it's very much learned from myself rather than from their peers. Certainly at this moment, they're both kind of 6 and 2, so they're kind of been introduced to video games via me rather than anyone else. So again, it's an interesting place to be, and it's perhaps kind of unique in this kind of in the history of video games. So what we did, we conducted some kind of bespoke research. We did a survey of 1,000 families, and within all these families, all the children were kind of involved in playing video games somewhere or other. So, but yeah, everyone liked playing video games. We also did a diary study amongst a smaller group of people. So it's kind of mobile ethnographic study. We did that to kind of, I guess, get under the skin of their experiences, find out how video games intersect with kind of family life over the course of a week. And then finally, we did some depth interviews. So we went in home and kind of recorded them, just helped bring some of the research findings to life. And this being the Children's Media Conference, we've gone all in on media. So we've got kind of 3 or 4 videos to show you throughout the course of this, just to, like I said, get under the skin of the experience and how people game within families. So going back to parents, I think this is really important. This kind of has fundamentally changed what video games are for children, how they engage with video games. Their parents are not just kind of interested in gaming, but their parents have been brought up, when video games first became a kind of mass market, kind of, I guess, medium of entertainment. So kind of when PlayStation kind of came around, their parents were kind of young and growing up. Most of the parents we spoke to were kind of younger Gen X, older millennials, kind of 25 to 54, somewhere in that kind of age range. All the children were aged between kind of 3 and 17. So all these parents were growing up as kind of gaming was exploding as a medium, and these parents aren't just playing video games. They were just playing video games when they're younger. They're still playing video games now. We're really surprised to see that most of these parents are saying they're playing kind of 10 hours of video games a week, and a lot of that is on traditional consoles, but most of it for these parents are kind of mobile devices as well. And those mobile devices are a gateway for their children. It's how their kids are getting into gaming themselves, is observing their parents, observing what the parents are doing, and copying it and wanting to copy it. The parents as well are kind of very conscious of how their experiences gaming differed from their children. So, when they were gaming themselves as kids, it was perhaps seen as slightly more negative, or their parents would be less open to it. Whereas for them, their kids are gaming, and it's very much something which they're happy to do. It forms part of their kind of daily interactions with their children, and it's very much a different experience because of that. On the flip side, especially amongst some of the more kind of avid gamers, they were very aware of the differences between how they game and how their children game. There was almost this kind of sense of the uncanny. As gaming for their children, it was very kind of familiar. It felt kind of like the kids were doing something similar to what they were interested in, but they were also aware of how different it was as well. And certainly that was, I guess, perhaps the biggest source of tension amongst kind of parents and children, was just how quickly children's tastes developed over time, and how they kind of perhaps started somewhere kind of playing the same kind of games as the games the parents had introduced them to, but quickly developed their own tastes, kind of moved on. So yeah, and I think something else which is really interesting here is just how the market is continuing to fragment. So parents are kind of relatively sure of what their kids are doing, know their kids kind of want something perhaps more than what they want as well. Their tastes are developing quickly, but kind of the external forces at work here. The market is fragmenting. There's lots of different hardware devices people can play video games on these days. What these video game devices are is more kind of amorphous than ever. So you have things like Nintendo Switch, which is a home console. It's a mobile kind of console as well. And also kind of software services and platforms. So games which once would only existed on one type of kind of format, so a home console, can now be consumed on a mobile device, and they're completely kind of uncompromised experiences, and that very much fits in with kind of children's expectations. But it's very hard to pin down what these children want, because the market is changing so quickly, and they are kind of so quick to respond to that. And I think things like AR and VR are kind of two kind of points in case, and they're really examples of us not exactly knowing which way, how things are going to pan out. Children are very open to this. A lot of the children we spoke to were talking about VR kind of very positively, thinking that would be the next logical step in terms of how video games will go. It's unclear if the market will pan out like that, but kids are kind of expecting and demanding these experiences, and they are a demanding audience. So what I want to do now is just show you first video, which is just, I guess, the parents' perspective of kind of how kind of gaming fits in with their family life.
I used to game quite a lot when the children were younger. I had a lot more time, but recently they're getting me into games more. So it's a lot different, because I used to like gaming, so now I'm like telling the kids not to game so much. So it's a different dynamic now, totally. It's a lot more intense than it used to be.
I actually went to a pre-launch party for the Xbox One before it came out. It was limited tickets. You had to win them. So I won tickets and went to that, so I got to see all of that before it was released as well.
I didn't know how quick they could do things and how much they could do things till I actually sat and watched them doing it.
I think it's very positive, it's creative, it makes them use their mind, imagination. It's not a very linear game either, so it's very open. So there's, you can build basically whatever you want.
Callum's terrible. He likes to pay, so he gets his pocket money, and he'll play a game and he'll see, I don't know, a better car or something. But he's got to pay £8 for this car. Well, that's his pocket money, and it's his choice. He can buy it if he wants. But it frustrates me. I'm like, there's nothing physical for your money. But he quite likes it, and we've argued about it in the past. But ultimately, it's up to him.
So as you can see there, a lot of these parents are very kind of open towards gaming. They think it's a very kind of positive experience. A lot of parents are talking about the kind of creativity of modern games and how they kind of help the children developmentally. But there's still, and even though there's a kind of shared interest between the kind of generations, there are still kind of sources of tension. A lot of these parents saw the kind of inherent duality in of kind of modern video games, and I think there is that kind of plurality of experience that perhaps there might not have been before, and it's even more kind of overtly obvious. These parents are seeing games as nurturing, positive, creative, but they also saw them as cynical, kind of potentially violent sometimes, and exploitative. I think perhaps what's different between perhaps this generation of parents and the previous one is these parents feel more informed, they feel more in control of the types of content their children are consuming. So parents either felt that they were more able to control what their children were playing, or they were kind of more open to some of their children playing kind of potentially violent video games. So they were kind of more at ease with that side of things. Where we saw a lot of the kind of frustrations creep in, and what really rankled with parents was how video games were kind of monetizing their children, and how they felt sometimes they were being exploited, and they felt that's the area where they had the least control, because sometimes innocuous games, innocuous experiences work in an underhand way, kind of targeting their children with advertising, or asking them to do things in terms of kind of contacting people on social media, or asking them to pay for kind of additional content. And that's where parents felt they had the least control, and that's where they felt most frustrated. It's not to say parents aren't open to these things per se, it's how sometimes these things are being implemented in games at the moment, which is causing that kind of tension. There's also two kind of key trends which are kind of influencing Generation Game, and Generation Game responding to as well. So software, video games are becoming far more kind of service-based. So back in the day, you get a disc, play it, complete the game, put it aside, sell it, whatever. These days, a lot of the bigger experiences, the things which are really making a lot of money in the marketplace, tend to be service-based or have some service-based overlay. So, rattling a few examples, Fortnite is kind of the game du jour at the moment. It is kind of absolutely huge. I think it made about $320 million in May alone. So it is, it's an industry in and of itself. Minecraft is sold for $3.5 billion to Microsoft. So these are huge things, and they're all based around kind of persistent worlds, experiences which kids can kind of drop in and out of, and even things like perennial kind of favourites, things like FIFA, which again was an experience which was kind of an annual release. You're expected to buy a game once a year. These days, that's very much changed. So, for instance, the World Cup edition of FIFA, which would have been sold for as £40-50 standalone game, was this year given away free as an update to kind of consumers. And one of the biggest elements of FIFA at the moment is kind of virtual trading cards, which allows kids to kind of buy, sell, trade kind of players virtually. And that in itself is $1 billion business for Electronic Arts. Absolutely huge. And again, these kind of service-based elements are creeping more and more into the kind of game experience. And children are responding to that and really lapping it up. And it's a kind of self-perpetuating cycle. The second thing is that gaming has turned from a singular experience into more of a kind of social experience. Now, games have always been multiplayer, and what I mean by singular is that people played games to derive kind of pleasure from playing the game itself, whether it's kind of on their own or with friends, etc. Now, playing games is much more about a kind of being part of a broader kind of social kind of interaction. So children are playing games which they might not otherwise have played, because if they weren't playing them, they'd be left out of the conversation at school. And again, mobile has kind of perpetuated and accelerated this a great deal. So you have children talking about playing Fortnite on the way home from school, on the bus, then going and playing it on their mobile phone, then playing it on their home console, and chatting with their friends, using kind of built-in share buttons like the one up there to kind of take pictures of what they're doing, share it with their friends, watching influencers online as well. And all this is part of this kind of bigger conversation that they want to be part of, and they would be excluded from if they weren't playing these games. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of kind of who Generation Game are. We want to take you through a bit of detail, so kind of the role that video games play in their lives, how they're accessing content, what gaming content they want, and also just kind of how to address their needs and the opportunities this audience kind of presents. So, in their own words, I'm going to do another video just about kind of how they see video games fitting into their day-to-day lives.
My name's Blake. I like gaming, football and maths.
If he had his way, he'd be playing PlayStation 24/7. Personally, I don't play a lot of PlayStation, and I don't really watch a lot of TV either.
When you're not here, I normally do it for the whole day. So, most of the day.
Yeah, weekends mainly. During the week doesn't necessarily play because homework at school and stuff like that, and clubs. So he's not constantly on it during the week.
I wake up at 5 o'clock and I go to school. I get at school at 7 o'clock, and then I stay there till 6 o'clock doing before school and after school revision. So when I get home, on top of doing running around playing football in school, I'm just completely shattered when I get home. So if I do play, it's a game that I'm quite good at, and it's not gonna hassle me any more than I've already been hassled. So I actually went to my mate's house a week ago, sleepover, and I brought my PlayStation over, so they had a TV over there, we had a TV over here, and we were just playing duos with each other. FIFA tournament we actually did as well, came second.
We play together sometimes as well, so it's sort of felt some bonding time at home, isn't it? And then, with the Jurassic Park Alive, as we say, we go for walks, catch dinosaurs. So I know it's spending time together, doing something.
Like on the PS4, sometimes I play the Harry Potter game with my brother, and wrestling and football sometimes.
We sometimes, when we go on holiday, if we take the PlayStation, we used to have family game night, it was called. It gets a bit competitive, particularly Callum. Callum's really, really competitive, does not like losing. So it starts off fun and quite funny, and then we end up turning it off because Callum goes in a mood if he don't win.
Yep.
Cool. So as you can see there, almost from the off, video games are kind of mainstay in their lives, and a lot of that's encouraged by parents. You saw that example there of that the parent who was kind of very much into video games himself. It's encouraged by him. It was seen as a way that he could kind of bond with his son, and it was seen as a positive experience. It wasn't being sat inside, stuck in front of a TV. It's something which they could do together, and was a proxy for kicking a ball about in the park. What we found, I guess, really surprising, though, not just the fact that kids were playing kind of games at such a young age, it was the kind of emotional connection, emotional resonance that video games had with them. We asked kids about kind of what they loved to do, and video games was the first thing that kind of came to mind when we asked them, how would you spend your spare time? They said play video games. That was the thing that kind of leapt out for them, and they're kind of really, really kind of connecting with it. And there's kind of a few different reasons for this. As you saw in that video there, there's a teenager there who, just wanted to play video games to let off steam, just want to kind of shoot some zombies or whatever when he got home from school, just to kind of relax. But video games very much encapsulate these kind of lean back needs, but also these kind of lean in needs as well. And that's both, taking part in a kind of some active, something which they can engage with. But it's also about engaging with their peers and friends as well as part of this kind of broader conversation. And video games at the moment kind of encapsulate all of this for children, and it's something which they can do almost at any point of the day, and it just kind of fits around their life stage, kind of lifestyle really well. What that results in is that kind of by the age of about 8 years old, kids are playing video games as much as consuming any other form of media. But I think what's really important here is that the children we spoke to expected video games not to kind of sit alone in a silo. They expected video game consumption or playing video games to kind of cross over and converge with the other kind of media they were consuming. So particularly around kind of watching TV, playing video games, and the kind of interactions on social media as well. And there's some really great examples of how people are doing kind of responding to these needs at the moment. So Netflix are currently developing Minecraft Story Mode, the TV series. So that is an example, that is a kind of choose your own adventure online. So it's not a passive experience for children. It's something where they can take part actively in the experience and direct the adventure or the story. So it is very much a converged experience. It's about kind of games and TV coming together to create something entirely new that hasn't existed before.
If we look a little bit at why and how Generation Game are actually consuming content, we know that for Generation Game, they're using lots of different devices when they're actually gaming, and the penetration point of smartphones is actually really, really high amongst those older kids, so the 13 to 17-year-olds. But really the access point for younger kids is a tablet, so them actually owning their own tablet, which might not necessarily have been their own, but after a period of time, parents have let the child have it and bought themselves their own one, a brand new one. And we know for these kids, it's not only important to play across all these different devices, but it's really important to have that continued experience. So they might start playing a game on their PC, for example, but then they also want to play on their tablet, they want to play on their smartphone if they're out and about. And this is something that's really important for brands and companies to actually recognise and also help facilitate. We saw recently there was an article in the news about Sony refusing to let Nintendo users of Fortnite access their accounts on Sony devices. But Microsoft and Nintendo actually did the complete opposite. And off the back of that, they were able to produce this campaign, which was, really, really positive and seen really positive in the eyes of gamers, and much to the delight of Generation Game as well, because that's something that they actually mentioned during this research. And we know for Generation Game, the coming together of games and mobile and social platforms is really important, and it fulfills that need and the craving that they have for some of these shared experiences. And those shared experiences might be if they're just playing against their friends online, but it is also about playing against people that they don't potentially know, and also increasing their network and speaking to people who have the same love of gaming as they do, which again is really, really important as kids get older. And we know also that playing games is not just about playing with your friends and playing with your peers. The families that we spoke to said actually it's really important for us to be able to spend time with our own kids. And we know the dad in the video talked about, it's bonding time with me and my son. And the mum talked about, well, actually, when we go away, it's really important that we spend time together. And if that means having to take the games console with them, that's something that they're sort of quite open to doing. And it almost replaces some of those more traditional board games and some of those game nights that parents might have had in the past.
So we talked about how they're consuming content, but not necessarily what content they're consuming. So again, in their own words, have a kind of a video talking about what they like to play.
I love when I play a game, I love to just complete it and know everything about the game. obviously there's that competitive element like with your friends and whatnot, trying to like be better than them and everything else. And if you're not like that athletic, then it's a great way to get back at them.
And it's very open and creative, so you can use your imagination more, I think, because it's like a blank canvas.
My favourite game is wrestling. You get to choose whichever character you want.
And I like shooter games and action type stories.
You like to complete story modes, don't you? And then you'll trade a game in for the newer one.
Sometimes I play a Simpsons game, but I didn't understand what the people were saying, so I just looked around. So I built some of the houses that I could do, but I couldn't do anything. I just could build houses, and that's all I could do.
You can't do as much on a phone as you can with a controller on a PlayStation.
I also think like mobile games are designed to be quite short, so it's like that competitive and like addiction, like to just constantly do it repetitively. You occasionally have like really long games that like you have to do it every day to like build it up.
Charlie's got a couple of colouring ones, but you find the colouring ones are really dull. It's like the pixel colouring ones, and as much as she likes it, I think they're a bit repetitive and they're not very good quality from what I've seen of what she's done on them.
Like Fortnite, I would really like it to be in virtual reality because it's normally third person. Like I want to know it'll be like first person, so you like look around like as first person.
Generation Game are very much kind of a broad cohort of kind of ages, so kind of 3 to 17, like we said. So unsurprisingly, it's quite hard to kind of put your finger on a single type of content they like consuming. As you saw from that video there, I think there's frustrations from younger children who were demanding these kind of more sophisticated experiences because they'd seen their parents play games or they'd seen their peers, their kind of siblings, slightly older peers play games. And they kind of quickly want to move away from the kind of basic things their parents might be downloading for them and want something a bit more sophisticated. They might do that and start dipping the kind of, trialing those kind of games and then becoming frustrated. So they do want these kind of uncompromised experiences, but it's how to guide them through that. So there's a number of different strategies which developers are using at the moment. So certain games developers use things like story modes, which allow you to kind of take part and understand kind of, consume the story as a kind of as a single narrative without actually having to complete the kind of more complex elements of the game. People like Nintendo have things like assist mode, so they'll allow kids to play what is ostensibly a very kind of tough game like Super Mario. If anyone's played it, it's not an easy game. It might look kind of quite cutesy on the face of it, but it is kind of a tough, challenging game. But they incorporate something like an assist mode, which allows you, it responds to how people are playing. So if it sees you struggling in the game, it'll let you skip past a certain area. And those are the kind of things which kind of can help alleviate this frustration that kids get as they kind of progress quickly through to kind of consuming more and more complex content. There are a few kind of, I guess, universal themes coming out of this. So in terms of what they really didn't want, what they didn't want at the moment is these kind of gimmicks, which have been a bit of a crutch for some of the big kind of mega publishers in the past decade or so. So Activision have made a lot of money out of things like Guitar Hero and selling plastic guitars to create these kind of ecosystems and create these kind of sticky service-based games that people are kind of coming back to every year by selling a guitar which people can use, and then selling various kind of downloadable kind of games to go alongside it. I think Toys to Life as well, so these kind of toys which you can buy as kind of action figures, which then you can kind of almost import into a game as well, have been huge for Activision as well. They've had a Skylanders series which has made hundreds of millions of dollars in the past decade, but has been kind of mothballed for the moment because consumer demand has just drifted away. Kids just aren't interested at the moment. So they don't reject these things, but they're certainly not essential for brands now to create these kind of huge, large-scale kind of gaming services and platforms. What kids did want was these kind of persistent worlds, and we've seen this kind of deployed really successfully by a wide variety of different brands. So you've got these kind of evergreen brands like Pokemon, which have been around for ages. The developer Niantic launched Pokemon Go a couple of years ago, and it was absolutely huge. I think at one point they had over 500 million monthly users. It's kind of dropped down now to only 60 million. So they have a core base of 60 million users playing this service-based game, a game which is a persistent world, a game which you can drop in and out of, and it works very well. It's, you know, for parents as well. We saw that gentleman earlier talking about the Jurassic Park game he plays with his kid. It's a mobile experience. It allows people to kind of engage with other people online, but it's very much a kind of asymmetric experience. So you can see other people in the kind of online world as you're playing, but it's not abrasive in the same way kind of online games have been in the past. Lego as well have done a kind of great job with things like Lego Worlds and Lego Dimensions, and then obviously the kind of game in the moment is Fortnite, which has almost come from nowhere, has been iterative and copied other games, but has kind of refined the formula and done a great job of it. But I guess what kind of the commonality between all those things is that what's really making these games successful is their way of kind of harnessing Generation Games' desire for kind of self-expression, creativity and personalization. They've done it to different degrees. Minecraft did an amazing job of just letting children do whatever they want, be whatever they want within a game world, and that experience was very kind of, you know, broad and you could, you know, define the experience yourself. Fortnite's done a slightly different job. It's almost taken some of those elements and kind of refined it and honed it down. So the really kind of genius thing that Epic have done with Fortnite is they give the game away for free, so it's completely free to kind of get involved. What they understand that children value is this kind of element of personalization. So this kind of slightly trite GIF here shows an emote which you're able to purchase within the game, and children are happy to do that. You saw in the video a kid saying, I don't spend a lot of money online, except when I saw this thing which I knew I could only buy for a week, and if I don't buy now, it's gone. And that's what he values, and that's what he's prepared to spend money on, and that's how they're making $300 million a month, which is absolutely kind of phenomenal. But we see these things kind of intersecting with children's kind of real lives as well. When you see people like Jesse Lingard at the World Cup doing Fortnite emotes when he scores a goal, children kind of respond really well to this, and they see their interests reflected in their kind of idols and heroes, you know, both, you know, influencers online, but also, you know, footballing idols as well. And they really like this, the way their kind of gaming life intersects with their kind of real life.
So just looking at how Generation Game expect to access games then, we know that parents aren't massively keen on in-game payment, so it's something that they try and stay away from. But again, there is this acceptance that if it's a child's pocket money and it's £8 to upgrade to a car, then that's really their own decision. But the reason why parents were almost so against it is because it's so different from their experience of buying games themselves. So because they were gamers, when they were younger, they would go to the shop, they would buy a game, they would pay for it, and that would be the end of it. They would just have it outright and there wouldn't be any further payments. And looking at adverts, parents didn't actually mind their children watching an advert to then be able to continue and play this game. But they felt it was really important that the advert was age appropriate, it was relevant to them and to them actually playing the game. And it also didn't disrupt the game too much, because otherwise mum and dad would never hear the end of it. But even some of the younger kids, they were actually quite aware of the fact that they were being monetised and the experiences were being monetised. And they're almost a little bit cynical about the fact that they were going to have to pay to upgrade to whatever it might be. And there's also this real awareness that actually it's going to cost my mum and dad money to actually have to fund some of this and to have to fund some of the gaming. So there was that real awareness of the financial impact it might potentially have on their parents. And this just leads us on to our final video clip before Dan summarises.
Once there was this really nice dress with flowers on the waist, and I wanted to get it, but you had to buy it.
Like in Fortnite, there are V-Bucks that if you buy them with real money, then you can buy stuff in the game. I personally don't like buying stuff for games. I like to just play the game as it is.
Yeah, same here, but quite recently, an amazing item in Fortnite came out, and I did spend a little bit of money. The first time I've ever done it on Fortnite.
It's not something I've let them do. I can't imagine me paying, say, £6 just so they can put blue eyes on a character or anything like that.
Well, if it's a free game, I find you haven't paid for the game, so don't mind it. But then obviously, because there's more and more content for it coming out, so costumes and stuff like that, it does carry on a little bit too much.
Like you get to pick your own skins. There's backpacks.
Yeah, that's only if you buy them though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or in the battle pass.
Yeah, but you have to buy the battle
Yeah,
pass.
battle pass
yeah.
as well. Pixel Gun's quite good for like content, because like you could also buy stuff and get some stuff for free. So, like you could watch videos for like 1 gem, or like a video for like
There's
a lucky chest.
Yeah.
Like it kind of like changes up the game. Like you could earn coins or you could buy coins.
Yeah, and then Blake doesn't have to ask me to buy them all the time.
You've had a few, haven't you, that have come up with adverts and he just sort of like shrugs his face and clicks off of them or whatever, but I won't say it's a massive inconvenience for me, but I think it's a bit more frustrating for the kids because they're in the middle of playing the game and they're trying to move on to the next level and it just sort of like kicks them up. I have noticed him a couple of times, he'll just like shut the whole thing down and stop playing it and go on to something else that he knows don't do it.
Sometimes they bother you, like if they come up regularly, like really a lot.
Yeah, some of them are quite long as well,
Yeah.
aren't they?
They're usually like 30 seconds or something.
Yeah. So it can be quite frustrating.
Annoying,
yeah.
So how do we address the needs of Generation Game? So as you've seen there, Generation Game really want games which kind of blend in seamlessly with the rest of their connected lives. So for game developers, they really need to ensure that gaming is at the heart of a multi-platform, multi-channel world. The experience can scale across devices. Mobile games should scale up to consoles. Console games should scale down to mobile devices. But this is also about ensuring that children's experiences are reflected in the games they play, and that's a great opportunity for brands to communicate with children via the media of games. Also, for Generation Game, video games are an essential tool for connecting with their peers and the peer group. For that reason, social mechanics should be at the heart of video games. They often are, but they're often deployed in a terrible way, a cynical way, a way which children reject, a way parents reject. But it doesn't detract from the point that it should be there, and games should be built with kind of social at their heart and ways of enabling kids to connect with each other without disrupting or distracting from the game itself. Finally, Generation Game expect this kind of frictionless access to content, so they want games which are uncompromised. They want to play mobile, like console quality games on their mobile device, and they also want them free. So it's a big ask, but brands should be thinking about how they can provide kids with access to games in this way. And again, it provides a big opportunity for brands, but brands really need to do a kind of a calculus. Should you invest in creating a terrible mobile game, a cynical mobile game which is poor quality, is showing kids adverts they don't want to see, is kind of asking them for micropayments, or should you think about kind of the long game and think about like how you can kind of partner with developers? So a great example is the way Marvel have kind of partnered up with Fortnite recently and has provided kind of in-game content for free around the launch of the Infinity War movie, stuff which they could easily have sold, but they've just given away to consumers, and it's kind of a massive kind of brand benefit for both those brands, and it's something which they've benefited from. I think a great kind of example of how this has been deployed, and it wasn't recently, it was a few years ago. So a big game developer with a kind of very popular football game noticed that in South America everyone was playing their football game, but they realised they weren't actually selling any copies, and they realised that everyone's playing pirated copies of the game, and that happens all over the world, but particularly at that time in South America it was kind of prolific. So they had a choice: do they kind of crack down on this, or do they lean into the opportunity? And they actually chose to lean into the opportunity. They realised they could they go out to their partners and tell them about how many eyeballs were playing the game, and based on that, they used that opportunity to sell ad space in the game, sell ad space on these virtual advertising hoardings within the game, and made kind of as much money from that as they would from selling the game itself, possibly more. So that's the kind of opportunity which brands should be thinking about, kind of leveraging to kind of connect with Generation Game and give them what they need. Cool. Thank you very much.
Any questions for either of our speakers? Yep. Do you want to come up? Do you want to come up? You just stand there.
Hi. Just wanted to ask, The statistics felt quite male, and I'm just wondering, anecdotal, whether you know of any studies that are happening, whether the results would be skewed if it was more about, if it was, say, mums and daughters, or how much of this is being driven really by dads and lads, or certainly dads.
Yeah, no, I think what we found from the study is there were these expected demographic differences between boys and girls in terms of how they were playing games, in terms of the types of games they wanted. I guess we were surprised at how much how quickly girls got into video games, and as well as boys, that came a lot from picking up tablets, seeing their parents play on tablets and phones. So at the outset, at the earliest age, 3 years old, when they start engaging with the games, the experiences are very similar. They do start to diverge over time. So boys tend to get more into traditional home games consoles, and girls tend to get more into mobile devices, both very much into the gaming on both sides. And you saw that in one of those slides there, I think it's 50% of girls say they love gaming. And again, it's still one of the first things they think about doing, and one of the first types of media they want to consume. It's the ways they play games, so that mobile gaming versus home console gaming does define the types of games they play. So girls tend to start playing more mobile games, these pick up, put down experiences, and boys tend to play more these lean in games, action games, football games, etc. So some of these almost expected differences appear, but that is as much because of how they're playing the games as because they are, boys and girls.
So for the cross-generational stuff, you'd think, does that mean that it tends to be more girls perhaps are playing more on their own, or certainly not with their parents? Whereas the dads
no, because I think the mobile gaming is really interesting. It's not this passive, it's not an individual experience. It's something which people are doing together. So kids are watching their parents play mobile games. They're pestering them for their phone. They get the phone. Parents are sitting there watching their kids play mobile games. So mobile gaming isn't always a solo experience that we perhaps think it is. And again, you saw that parent there walking around the garden with his child catching dinosaurs. It can be a social experience. So I wouldn't say mobile gaming is by default a single player experience.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Thank you. Just a quick one for Anna. When you were talking about how people talk to their voice device, and we're getting used to being rude, just saying what they wanted rather than being nice. But do I remember that there is some presumably embedded coding or something where there were certain things reported a few months ago, wasn't it, where if you were extra nice, that was a way of getting to something. I think it was like to play Radio 4, which was, I think that, are you aware of that being embedded?
I know that the Amazon Kids device now has built that in. So if you ask, in Amazon Kids, in the world of the Amazon Kids voice tech, if you ask nicely, it recognises you asking nicely and praises you for that. So you still get what you want if you don't ask nicely. But
that one was actually where you didn't get to it unless you said, "Oh, please, will you take me to whatever."
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. That's very interesting, and I don't know. I think parents would be very happy for it to be built in, so you don't get what you want until you ask nicely. But whether or not they do, I think that might be a step too far from the provider perspective. But I think it does meet a real need that parents have. They want it to be built to carry on the work they're doing with their kids to bring them up in the way they want them brought up and not to undermine it. So I think it's been a very popular move from Amazon to do that.
I've got two quick questions, actually, one for each. You were talking about Discovery, Anna, and I wondered whether you'd looked at Amazon Show as well as just Echo and Dot.
Yeah, we haven't, because so few people have got it, but I think it will make a big difference. I think the fact that when you make a text search, the fact that you do get a list of options is so fundamental to the way you then use it. I think with Amazon Show, if you make the voice search, you still get a visual output. It'll have a big impact on discovery. It's when you've got zero visual UI that it makes it such a difficult discovery mechanism. Okay. But if Amazon Show becomes something that takes over from pure voice, I think it'll have a big impact.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's why they've done it, to address that issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the other question I've got is about games and whether parents are buying to remove or paying to remove ads from games.
Ads, it's really interesting with ads because we started the research thinking parents will find ads in games negative by default. They just won't like them. I think people didn't like the way ads were deployed in a lot of games, so the kids found it intrusive. You saw a parent in there saying their kid was just turning off games and getting bored because they were there. But actually, ads were felt to be quite positive if they were used in a sensitive way, because it removed a kind of an issue for parents. They didn't need to kind of dip in their own pockets. And we saw 68% of parents, I think, in a study said ads were a positive thing for them if it allowed them to spend less money. So if the ads were done in a sensitive way, if they weren't disruptive, then people were happy to consume them, both the kids and the parents. It was only when they were disruptive, and people then tended to just turn away. They didn't engage with the game, so it was almost a kind of a barrier to playing that game.
Parents weren't concerned about the kinds of adverts that were being shown their kids.
A lot of the time, people, when we was talking to people, we expected there to be negativity around these adverts. People didn't like how intrusive they were. There was kind of concern that people could see potentially stuff which wasn't appropriate, but we didn't get too many examples where people had seen that. And I think advertising is something which people are very open to if it removes the need for paying. I think the way people have seen ads was the fact they were intrusive potentially at the moment, and that was an issue for the children more than anything else. It's because the children wouldn't play the games, they put things down. People seemed a lot more open to it than we thought they would be. We just couldn't get that negativity which we thought we might have seen at the outset of the research.
Thank you very much. Thank you.